At 7:40 in the morning on the 23rd of March, 2021, a container ship called the Ever Given ran aground in the Suez Canal. The Ever Given was, at the time of the grounding, one of the largest container ships in the world, approximately 400 meters in length, 59 meters in beam, with a displacement when fully loaded of approximately 220,000 metric tons. It was carrying approximately 18,300 standard containers, each measuring 6 meters in length, stacked several stories high above its deck and extending deep into its hold. It was, in the literal physical sense, one of the larger objects that humans have ever built and moved across the surface of the Earth. It was also, beginning at 7:40 on the 23rd of March, wedged diagonally across the entire width of the Suez Canal, its bow buried in the eastern bank and its stern pushed against the western bank, blocking all traffic in both directions through one of the most consequential waterways in the history of global commerce. The ship remained grounded for 6 days. During those 6 days, approximately 420 vessels waited in queue at the northern and southern approaches to the canal. The disruption to global trade flows was estimated by Lloyd's List Intelligence at approximately $9.6 billion per day. A single gust of wind. Canal authorities cited a sudden windstorm and dust conditions that reduced visibility and caused the ship to lose steerage, had halted 12% of global trade. To understand why the Ever Given's grounding mattered as much as it did, you need to understand what the Suez Canal is in the architecture of global trade. The canal, opened in 1869 after a decade of construction under French engineering direction, cuts through the Isthmus of Suez to connect the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. It eliminates the need for ships traveling between Europe and Asia to sail around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa, a route that adds approximately 7,000 kilometers to the journey and several weeks to the transit time. For the global shipping industry, which moves approximately 90% of world trade by volume, the canal is not merely a convenience. It is a structural component of the economics of international trade. The time savings of the Suez route versus the Cape route are directly translated into reduced fuel consumption, reduced crew costs, reduced vessel time costs, and the ability to maintain tighter delivery schedules. The container shipping model, the system by which manufactured goods move from factories in Asia to markets in Europe and the Americas in standard boxes that can be loaded directly onto trucks and trains, was built with the assumption of reliable Suez transit. Approximately 19,000 ships per year transited the Suez Canal before the Ever Given incident, carrying goods whose value represented approximately 12% of global trade, a figure that encompasses manufactured electronics, clothing, chemicals, consumer goods of every description, and significant quantities of energy in both directions. The immediate logistics crisis generated by the grounding was visible in almost real time. The navigation technology available to the shipping industry meant that every vessel operator, cargo owner, freight broker, and supply chain manager in the world was able to watch, via vessel tracking websites that aggregate GPS position data, the queue of waiting ships growing at both ends of the canal. Satellite images of the Ever Given wedged diagonally across the canal, its bow buried in the sandy bank, were widely shared within hours of the grounding and became one of the most viewed news images of the year. The question facing the approximately 400 ships that eventually queued at the canal's entrances was whether to wait for the canal to reopen or to divert around the Cape of Good Hope. The diversion decision was not straightforward. The Cape route added approximately 8 to 12 days of additional transit time for large vessels, depending on the specific origin and destination, plus the additional fuel cost. For ships carrying time-sensitive cargo, fresh produce, temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals, just-in-time components for manufacturing, the diversion cost was potentially lower than the waiting cost. For ships carrying less time-sensitive cargo with high fuel costs, waiting might be economically preferable. The uncertainty about when the Ever Given would be freed, the initial refloating attempts on the 23rd and 24th failed, and it was not until the 29th that a combination of dredging, tugboat effort, and a favorable high tide freed the vessel, meant that diversion decisions had to be made under incomplete information. Many vessels chose to wait, some diverted, and the global shipping industry ran complex optimization calculations for nearly a week. The ever-given crisis became the most vivid public demonstration in recent memory of a concept that supply chain professionals have been discussing with increasing urgency for years: the fragility of just-in-time logistics systems. Just-in-time manufacturing, the operational philosophy, developed most influentially by Toyota in the post-war Japanese automotive industry, of receiving components and materials at precisely the moment they are needed in the production process rather than maintaining large inventories, had by 2021 been adopted in various forms across virtually every sector of manufacturing and retail. The economic logic was compelling. Inventory is expensive. Warehousing space costs money. Capital tied up in stored inventory earns no return. A supply chain that delivers exactly what is needed exactly when it is needed allows companies to operate with minimal working capital and minimal storage cost. The vulnerability that just-in-time creates is proportional to its efficiency. A system with no inventory buffer has no resilience to supply disruption. If a component does not arrive at the moment it is needed, production stops. There is no warehouse of backup inventory to draw on. The disruption propagates immediately. The ever-given grounding made this vulnerability vivid in a way that years of academic and professional discussion had not. Toyota and other manufacturers that relied on components manufactured in Asia and shipped through Suez began receiving alerts about affected container shipments within the first day of the grounding. Consumer electronics manufacturers tracked shipments of specific components. Retailers tracked seasonal inventory consignments. Energy companies tracked shipments of liquefied natural gas and petroleum products. The 6-day delay did not ultimately cause catastrophic disruption to most supply chains. Most could absorb a 6-day delay without production shutdowns through a combination of existing inventory, expedited alternative shipping, and production schedule adjustment. But the analysis produced by the crisis was clear. An extended blockage, 2 weeks, a month, would have caused genuine production shutdowns across multiple sectors. The Ever Given itself was refloated on the 29th of March, 2021, after dredging equipment removed an estimated 30,000 cubic meters of sand from around the bow, and after tugboats spent several days applying coordinated pulling force at timed intervals calibrated to take advantage of tidal height. The entire canal had been single-lane operation for several days after refloating as the queued vessels transited. The full backlog was estimated to have cleared within approximately 3.5 days. The Suez Canal Authority detained the vessel and its owner, the Japanese shipping company Shuikisen Kaisha, while pursuing a compensation claim initially stated at $900 million, later reduced through negotiation, covering the cost of the salvage operation, lost canal, revenues during the blockage, and reputational damage. The claim was settled confidentially. The investigation into the grounding's cause concluded that the primary factors were strong winds in combination with a dust storm that reduced visibility and possible technical issues with engine or steering that were not definitively established. The practice of transiting very large vessels through the canal in strong wind conditions came under scrutiny, as did the adequacy of Canal Authority guidance and support for vessels of the Ever Given size class. The Ever Given spent 6 days blocking a canal, and in those 6 days, it provided a real-time demonstration of a supply chain vulnerability that the global economy had been accumulating for decades. The lesson was not that the Suez Canal should be wider, or that ships should be smaller, or that wind should be different. The lesson was about the consequences of building global systems that optimize so aggressively for efficiency that they eliminate the redundancy, the inventory, the alternative routing, and the slack that allows systems to absorb disruption without catastrophic failure. The Ever Given crisis coincided, by accident of timing, with the COVID-19 pandemic's disruption of global supply chains, which had already exposed the same vulnerability through different mechanisms. Factory shutdowns in China, port congestion in the United States, container shortages across the Pacific. The simultaneous occurrence of multiple supply chain stresses in 2021 produced, for For the first time in decades, serious policy discussion in major economies about supply chain resilience, nearshoring of critical manufacturing, and strategic stockpiling of key components. Whether that discussion produces lasting changes in how global supply chains are designed, or whether the efficiency logic reasserts itself as memories of the disruption fade, is the question that supply chain professionals are still debating. A 400-meter ship, a gust of wind, and $9.6 billion a day.